Good evening, guys. I hope you all are doing well. And I hope you all are doing well. I first of all thank everyone for your presence here. It's really great that you all want to attend this session and want to gather the knowledge. I have your questions cleared in your mind. Yeah, I don't want to delay it more. I request my fellow being Diksha so to introduce the speaker and start off.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Deeksha, and good afternoon. I'm happy to be extending a warm welcome to everybody present here for the webinar today. And it is truly an honor to be a part of a society that empathizes and prioritizes mental well-being. So it's great to have each of you today taking a step forward to a more open-minded society. I'm glad to have our president-elect of Rotary Bangalore Yelahanka, our parent Rotary, Dr. Brij Mohan, grace this webinar with his presence. Thank you for taking out your time from your super busy schedule and accepting our invitation, sir. Welcome. I would like to welcome our speaker, Ms. Rachel Jayasaleen, to the webinar as well. Ms. Rachel is a psychologist and an NLP practitioner. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in psychology. She graduated with a master's in clinical psychology and an MPhil from Christ University, Bangalore. Her internships, study, and publication experiences are in the area of oncology, relationships, and addiction. Her work is currently in the domain of development of assessments as part of her research. Her passion lies in exploring, understanding, and applying a wide range of assessments that can help structure tailor-made therapeutic plans for clients. Her area of expertise is screening and diagnostic testing for developmental delays, LD, ADHD, behavioral and emotional disorders in children. She has conducted more than 50 workshops for students on a variety of topics such as communication skills, decision making strategies, dealing with anxiety, depression, and healthy interpersonal relationships. We're proud to have such an experienced woman address us today. Welcome, ma'am. Lastly, a heartfelt welcome to the faculty coordinator of RCBMSY, Ms. Tejaswini, all BMSIT and BMSSA faculty, my fellow Rotaractors and students, and attendees from various other Rotaract and Rotary clubs and different colleges. Welcome to each of you. Welcome to Step In and Step Up Anxiety and Depression. This webinar will be an interactive webinar. Our moderator, Rubini, has compiled a few questions for the speaker after studying the registration form responses sent in by each of you. After a short addressal by Ms. Rachel on today's topic, Rubini will begin with her questions. If you wish to ask any questions spontaneously, do type it down in the chat box to prevent interruptions. We shall address them as well. Refrain from turning your mics on unless very necessary. Thank you, and over to you, Ms. Rachel. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you so much for the welcome, as well as a beautiful statement that you put across, which is welcoming everyone who is interested in empathizing and prioritizing mental health. I think let me just turn on my camera so that I would at least, yeah. I think I'm not able to see myself, but all right. Thank you so much for the welcome. And we have about 50 minutes left in the session. So I would like to give a brief introduction about the topic and then move on to some of the questions that is being asked. This is not an easy time for a lot of us. We have different difficulties that are going on, and only each person knows what they are going through. Some people it's job related. I've had questions related to jobs or relationships, and even managing household work, and now the burden of children who are being there. Your siblings might be around the whole time. There are a lot of concerns which are coming up, and I think in the recent few days also we have been pushed into like observing a lot of trauma, people reacting to it. We've had news about suicides, and it's been a pretty stressful time. And I could also see the spike in the number of cases also which are coming in. So anxiety and depression are two of the most commonly experienced mental health concerns. Okay, so I would like to talk about both of them a little bit separately so that you understand what it actually is, and also to be able to understand what are the red flags or what do you need to look out for, and then we will quickly move on to the way forward. Okay, now both anxiety, okay, let's talk about anxiety. Okay, so anxiety is a normal reaction to stress, right? And a certain amount of anxiety is very important for all of us to feel pushed towards doing some work. If we don't feel any anxiety at all, we will not feel encouraged to do any work. We will just be sitting and chilling and relaxing the whole day. So anxiety is what makes you study for an exam, and anxiety is what makes you build up your resume to start applying for jobs, and anxiety is what makes you come home at the right time so that your mom doesn't really give you a 1 hour lecture. So this is all the normal reactions to stress. That's anxiety, right? Now if it is prolonged, if the feeling of anxiety is prolonged even after the stressor is no longer there, then it starts becoming an issue of concern, right? And it starts encompassing your day. It starts interrupting your day-to-day functioning and your routines, your social and occupational life, and it becomes quite overwhelming, right? That's when we say and we have anxiety. Something which you experience before an exam, it's normal, right? You need to have that to be able to prepare, and that's not troublesome. And once the exam gets over, you're no longer going to feel anxious anymore, which means that it is temporary. But recently I was working with a client who has frequent episodes of anxiety, which means she would be watching TV and then suddenly feel anxious. She's driving in a car and then she might start sweating and feeling any of these symptoms of anxiety. And that stops her from wanting to focus at her work, from going out and meeting her friends. She's constantly worried about how she looks, how she appears, anxious about physical appearance. So now it's becoming encompassing, right? It is going through all areas of your life, right? Now we have specific domains of anxiety as well. For example, job related anxiety is something that we are seeing, especially in students who are graduating, and right now in a state where we are not sure how the lockdown is, whether it's going to persist, whether it's going to ease out, we don't know. And with the economy also going down, the anxiety is going up. So job related anxiety is one. And then we have relationship related anxiety, where in the context of relationships, people are cut off from each other or maybe spending too much time with each other. And this can create some anxiety about what next. Does this mean there are a lot of fights? Does this mean that our relationship is going down the drain? I've not met this person for almost 2 months, for 3 months. Is our relationship the same? So relationship related anxiety. So it can also go into specific domains. Okay, so some of the things that you need to look out for, or when you know that you're experiencing prolonged anxiety, is the first thing that starts happening is thoughts, right? When there is anxiety, the first evidence that you would get is in the type of thoughts that you start to have, right? You will have repetitive thoughts, recurring thoughts, which disturb your functioning in your day-to-day life. This could be mostly in relation to where you anticipate the worst in situations. Let's say, for example, jobs, okay? Your anxiety would, your thoughts would be, what if I don't get a job? What if I'm never employed? What if my friends leave me behind? Or what if I don't get a job with a good salary and I will have to sit at home for an entire year? So you already start anticipating the worst. Now that is what we actually think as a significant concern. Whereas, let's say I gave the example of an exam. Now in that case, if I say, okay, what if I fail? and the exam gets over and you don't fail, everything gets back to normal, right? So that is optimum amount of anxiety. But even after the exam, if your thoughts move on to something different, which is, now I've passed this exam, what about the next exam? Or now what about my job? So if it starts becoming all encompassing, right, about different domains of your life, then it becomes a area of concern. Now when there is anxiety, you're also likely to have frequent bouts of irritability. Anything that people say at home, you could get irritated. That's a sign of anxiety. And also frequent headaches, difficulty in focusing, concentration, sleep gets affected. In the case of anxiety, you would have difficulty falling asleep. That's one of the indicators, where you get into bed and you will lie and you will think about various disturbing thoughts. You will anticipate the worst. You will run over everything which happened in the day and say that what if, and that will delay your regular sleep routine. And your body might constantly be in a state of rigidity. There could be physical symptoms like sweating or constipation or diarrhea. All this shows that the anxiety is encompassing different areas of your life. It's not just related to one stressor alone, right? Now, before I explain why this is actually happening, I'll also want to talk to you a little about depression. Okay. Now, just like I said, anxiety is a normal reaction to stress. Sadness is also a normal reaction to a disappointment, right? Let's say we don't get what we want. We were expecting a person to meet us on the weekend and he or she does not meet us. We feel sad. That's a normal reaction to a disappointment. But if the sadness is long term, if it starts becoming continuous and it starts interfering with different domains of our life, that is, if sadness is persistent, then that starts to lead into something more significant. One of that is depression. Even in depression, you would have frequent irritability. You could have crying spells, sometimes for no trigger at all, right? You could be watching a movie and you would start crying. Your mom might say something like, I wish things you were a happier person before. A normal comment, which at this point, because you're more vulnerable, you might start crying. And these crying spells are not very brief. It's not that you would cry for 2 minutes, but sometimes the crying can even go on for a couple of hours together. And it's mostly the crying happens in the absence of the person, as in you wouldn't know that this person is crying, but you would know that later they might come with red eyes. They would complain of a lot of body pains, somatic symptoms, body aches, backache, headache. It would shift from one to another. Um, and even in depression, you would have difficulty making decisions and difficulty in focus, concentration. You might feel tired when you wake up in the morning. Normal tiredness all of us have. I'm pretty sure 80% of you do not like getting up in the morning at the time that you're supposed to wake up. And you would feel a little cranky, a little tired till you have your morning cup of coffee, or till about half an hour till you get into your routines. But in the case of depression, you will not feel like getting out of your bed at all, and it will feel like you've got a huge weight on your shoulder. Your limbs might be very heavy, and even after you've slept for about 8 or 9 hours, you would still constantly feel fatigued and tired. And another significant difference we find with depression is weight increase or decrease and sleep increase or decrease. So basically what I'm talking is, there's a change from your usual routines in a very significant way, and it would be noticed more by others than by you. You would notice these changes. And also where you stop showing interest in things that you have had interest in before, right? So you could see there's definitely a difference between anxiety and depression. Both would have thoughts. Anxiety is more where you anticipate the worst in a situation, where you fear the worst. In depression, the thoughts will be like, I feel the future is hopeless, or I feel like I'm worthless. I'm helpless in this situation. And the way they experience it, no matter anything positive that you say, they would not be able to see a way out, because in the situation that they are in, everything around them appears negative. Okay, so this is anxiety and depression. Now, what can actually cause this, right? Who is more prone to anxiety and depression? Genetic vulnerability is definitely there, especially in, say, families which have, where people have depression, or families where thyroid, for example, is a common problem. Then you are more likely to inherit a vulnerability to getting this. Let's say there are two families. In one family, you have some distant aunt who has had depression, and you have another aunt who has thyroid issues. And then you have another family where there is no such history. Then in the first family, there is a much greater risk of the person getting a vulnerability towards depression than in the second family. So genetic factors are definitely there. Apart from that, there's a whole different there's even personality. For example, people who have had low self-esteem throughout their lives, those who grow up being sensitive to criticism, sensitive to feedback, and where there is poor social support, poor family system, a critical upbringing where you are constantly picked on for small things. These are all increasing vulnerabilities towards acquiring both depression as well as anxieties, right? So there's genetic factors, psychological factors are there, like I mentioned, personality, self-esteem, sensitivity to criticism, and social factors are also there, like poor social support, financial stress. All of this can definitely trigger either an episode of anxiety or in terms of depression. Now, what is actually happening right now is, because of the lockdown especially, we feel that a lot of things are not under our control, right? Which is true. We can't deny it. And okay. So that was, I hope everyone woke up because of that. And so because of the lockdown, we are feeling increasingly stressed because we look at more things on a daily basis that are going out of our control, right? I've had some questions related to the job market saying, I'm so worried about not getting a job. But we have to face the reality that that even the economy is not something that you can control. Nobody can control the economy. Even the government can't control the economy, right? So the lockdown days, how fast the virus is spreading, the number of deaths, and prices of products in the market, the hiring rate, all of this, the people are working with less salaries right now. All of this is not. Yeah, I request all of you to kindly mute your mics. We have less time, and this is kind of interrupting the flow as well. Right. So more of anxiety and depression comes in when we start focusing on things that we can't control. Things like when I get clients, the first thing they would come and tell me is they would emphasize on all of the things that they can't control, and they get anxious and depressed about it. For example, in the case of a relationship, I'm working with one of a client who's currently like the couple has filed for a divorce, but his anxiety is going up because there is no flights between the two countries where the husband and the wife is, and they're not able to get to the other place, right? So there is a lot of anxiety about, what if I don't get flights? What if I get a flight and I get stuck in the other country, right? What if I go there and my quarantine extends so much that I can't come back and have a stability at my work? Now, even these factors which you're emphasizing on are all factors which are not under your control, and the more you focus on it, the more your anxiety is going to go up, right? Or even with respect to getting a job, we all say that, like recently as last night, I got an email from one of my past students who was telling me that he's currently breaking down because It's been almost 3 months without a job, and he is constantly under pressure from his family. They are asking him, why are you just sitting around at home? Why are you not doing anything useful? Are you trying to get a job? What about your salary? Will you get a job with a good salary? So all of these questions start to worry you, and you start focusing on, what if I don't get a job? um, is this the end of the world? Remember, anxiety is anticipation of the worst, right? Your thinking is going to that extreme with these questions that are being asked, right? I know that a lot of adults, a lot of parents ask certain questions because they care, and that's all right. They do care, and that's the way in which they put across that care. But what can make a difference is how we choose to respond. We can choose to reply with something in a mature manner and take it in a productive sense, work positively, or we could choose to make that be more self-critical about ourselves, feel guilty because we are not doing enough, constantly strive for these something which is very difficult to attain, right? And even now, a strong influence on both anxiety and depression, especially for youngsters, is social media. Everybody is on Facebook, you're all on Instagram. There are probably things which I'm not aware about, which might have come later. But when you're constantly there, you should also understand that the information that is being put up there is all carefully curated. Nobody puts up a picture of a person crying. I'm pretty sure you will not go like that picture, no? But at the same time, you end up putting a happy face there, showing yourself with good clothes, everything is happening, you talk about the good things in your life, and that is what is shown to the others. So what you're portraying to the world, or what people are portraying to you, is a very perfect world where everything seems to be going fine, and then you start to compare, because that's the cultural upbringing that we are all used to. As young as when we are even in first standard, we're used to being compared with, next door auntie's son or daughter. That's how we have been brought up, right? And this is tuned into our brain to constantly compare, right? We feel even if one person is getting ahead, we start to feel that something that we are doing is wrong, or that it's not enough. So these thought processes definitely create a lot of impact in youngsters. Another concept that you need to understand is we are brought up in a culture also which emphasizes a lot on productivity, right? No parent likes to see their child lying around or lazing at home. If you laze for 5 minutes also, you're being told by someone at your home, what are you doing here? You're just rotting in your bed. Please get up and go do something. You're not allowed to laze. Boys are sent to play, girls are learned to learn a skill right from a young age. Even now, I can see the number of online pages where there are some very crazy classes, online classes for children, right? Pottery making, I mean, things that you can't learn online, but they're trying to push their children some certain types of math classes, which they're asking the child to take right from the first and second grade. So there's a constant need for productivity. Now, what has happened is, because of the lockdown, we were all initially stuck within our four walls when the restrictions were more, and we were definitely not moving around as much as before. And then people started feeling guilty because of not doing enough, feeling guilty because of not being productive. Yes, you need to, the reality is you're not going to college, you're not going to work. So just because you're at home doesn't mean that you're not being productive. It's just that your roles have changed, and we need to move to that groove rather than what was already existing before. I had a lot of youngsters saying that they feel guilty about, just even because they sleep for 1 or 2 extra hours, they feel like one whole day is gone. What did I do? I've not done enough. A state of panic. Am I doing enough for my work? I slept for 10 hours today. Oh no. That is okay, right? You have the time, and it's okay to laze. You don't always have to be productive, right? Unfortunately, our culture has brought us up thinking that being unemployed means that you're not worth it. Or if you don't have a job, it means you're not valuable enough. And that is not true. We are always relating value to having work, value to having money, value to looking good. And when we say society makes us think so, we only constitute society. So we also propagate these thought processes, which is actually creating a lot of mental health concerns in young individuals who grow up with these unrealistic standards that they are forced to live up to. Okay, so this is how anxiety and depression will start impacting an individual, right? It starts to become a self-destructive cycle where you start to first think, am I not good enough? Or what if I fail? And then that thought process brings you down. You start to feel sad. And when you feel sad, you don't feel like working. And when you don't work, you start to feel guilty about not working. And then you start thinking, see, I didn't work, so I'm going to fail. If I fail, then no one will accept me. So it becomes like a self-destructive cycle that you're stuck in. And it's a little difficult for a family member or a friend to pull you out of this cycle, because it's not something like physical, which you can just, like engineering students, you just take one wire, put it somewhere else, and the system starts running again. It's not that. It's thoughts, it's emotions. You can't touch it. You can't like wiggle it around, and none of that is possible. So as a way forward, right? So this is how it's influenced. This is how it's impacted. I will be answering some of your questions soon. Okay, so probably I'll just get to the questions first, and then we can wind up the session with what is it that you can do in terms of a way forward. Let me see if there's already any questions here. Otherwise, I would take up the questions which are already sent. In case we don't, there are some of the questions which I might be skipping also, because there are some details which I've already accumulated, and I have a page where the resources are there, and I will direct you to that page. You can, all of the resources are available for you to see. So I'll just go off to the questions. Right. So one of the questions was, does depression ever end? Like you think it's ended, but can it come back after a few months? The answer is definitely yes. Depression can come back any number of times, and if a person has already had an episode, they have more risk to get a second episode very soon, right? So it's not something that you would require medication for the rest of your life, but rather what's happening is the coping skills that you have is not able to balance out your stressor. Or it's like this, for example, let's say you wanted to go and ask your mother that you want to go stay over at a friend's place, and every time you go and ask your mom, she's working in the kitchen, for example, and you go and ask her, she's busy in the kitchen, she says no. Next week you go ask her again she says no. And that's the only thing that you're thinking, and after about 20 times of being told no, you make up a decision. So the next time that your friends say, Machan, let's go for a night out, you will say, dude, I don't even want to ask my mom. I know what her answer is going to be. But you have tried that same solution hundreds of times. That doesn't mean that it's a failure, right? So depression, it works like that. Something which a coping method which you have used many times before suddenly might stop working. And you will usually find people experiencing depression during transition stages. Let's say adolescence is a transition, entering a new job is a transition, college to job is a transition, school to college is a transition, entering a relationship, breaking from a relationship is a transition, post delivery of a baby, getting the baby, that is a transition from pregnancy to being a mother. And then menopause is a transition. When children leave the house, that's a transition. So all of these transition phases are triggers that you need to be more careful during these times, that anxiety or depression could come in. Okay, so depression, definitely it could come back. So what therapy does or what counseling does is it equips you with skills to be able to deal with it better. So in mental illness and mental health issues, we don't look for a cure, we look for a management. We give people the skills so that they can manage by themselves. Okay, and we have another question which says, does it have to do anything with age or environment we grow up? Yes, the environment in which we grow up can definitely be a vulnerability. Like I mentioned, having constantly critical parents, for example, could be a trigger, like, sorry, could be a vulnerable, make you more vulnerable to criticism, right? And you're more likely to make wrong decisions, for example, in relationships, and therefore get hurt in the process, because you're tuned to think in a particular manner that this is how life is. But when you go face the reality, it will be completely different, right? So yes, with the environment you go on is very important. um, um, right, another, I think we had a question on the chat. I hear people talking about how if you're anxious and upset, you should talk to someone about it. I find it hard to share my problems. Do you think that's a problem to share? Alternate, yes. So a lot of individuals who are introverts, for example, they might find it difficult to talk about their problems. Or even if they're extroverts, maybe they've been brought up in a family where emotions are not discussed. Now, this is something I've strongly found in Indian cultures and Indian families, that in our family, nobody wants to talk about a negative emotion. If someone is sad, we'll give them a solution and we'll go and make the next meal and we'll carry on with our day. But if someone is happy or successful, yes, happy things are celebrated, sad things are pushed under the carpet. For example, very few men in our culture would actually come out and say that they have depression, because it's considered as a weakness, right? Again, like, you understand, these are all social stereotypes. Okay, so if you are feeling anxious or upset, right, you don't always have to talk to a person. Sometimes, yes, dialogue is important, but that does not mean it has to be a dialogue with another person. Especially for introverts, we encourage something like journal writing, writing down your thought processes, writing out your emotions rather than just keeping it as thoughts. Okay, because whenever a thought exists as a thought, it has the potential of becoming anything much bigger. Okay, for example, let's say that so one of my clients always felt that if she is not if she's not good looking enough, she is going to be left in her relationship. That is one thought. Okay, now if you keep it as a thought, it exists inside the head, where it can connect to any possible memories in your head as well. So then she's connected it to her third standard class, where after a play, right, no, sorry, for a play, her teacher told her that she's choosing someone else because that girl looks more beautiful as a butterfly. So something as an old memory like that comes to her mind, where she says, see, there I was left behind because I didn't look good enough. Now my relationship 30 years later, this boy left me, it must be the same. So all of this happens when it's still existing inside your head as thoughts. So as a way forward, it's very important that even if you don't talk to someone, it's important that you write it down. So you can write it down, you can reflect. Some people write letters to themselves, letters of positivity, positive affirmations to themselves. You can write a letter to another person. You don't have to post it, but pour out your feelings on that letter, and maybe keep it in a book or tear it up, flush it down the toilet. That doesn't matter, but it shouldn't exist within you. Emotions or thoughts that are harmful, that are make you feel a certain way, shouldn't exist inside you. It should always be out. Okay, so it's important that you talk to someone. It's definitely not a problem to not feel like talking to people, but it's important that it comes out in some way or the other. Okay, right. I'll just a particular question here. How do I help a family member or a friend who's going through depression? Right now, here, a couple of things have recently come up, where I think after this particular actor committed suicide, sorry, that he took his own life, that we have seen a spike in the number of people who have realized that, oh my God, if we can push someone like that to take a particular decision, I'm scared right now. So I've had at least about 15 to 20 calls in the last 2 days, all youngsters who are experiencing very distressing thoughts, all right? And also from friends who call in and say that I have this member here, he's going through this is a sentence that he stated, is it something harmful? Should I do something? I would say that the first and foremost thing that you can do for someone is listen. As Indians, we are tuned to give advice to people, even if it's the person sitting next to you in a bus. No, no advice giving at all. Okay, you should always understand, you should know how to listen first, right? Sometimes just by listening, a lot of people feel like you're going to be judged by what you say, by what they say, and that is one of the strong reasons they shut up or they don't talk, right? And ours is a very judgmental culture, right? We are always afraid what people would say. Even I, as a psychologist, when I went through a very difficult time, the first thought which comes to my mind is, what will people say when I'm a psychologist and I have a difficult time? Right? They would laugh at me, they would do this. So we are always bothered about what other people would say, that we lose ourselves in the process. Okay, so first foremost thing you could do is listen to them, right? Listen to them, non-judgmental listening, which means no advice giving. And if a person is going through a low phase like depression, it's important you tell the person that you are there for them. Do not tell things like it will be okay. That's the worst thing you could tell a person, is you will be okay, because in their head they know they are 100% not okay, right? And they will think that you are not able to understand what they are going through. So don't say that it's going to be okay. Don't tell them things like, have a little alcohol, things will get better. Go for a walk, things will get better. Show pictures of people who are worse off than them and say, see, they're like this, you are like, you're way better. No, all these are big no's. Okay, so with respect to depression and anxiety, I will also be directing you towards my page. I've already collected resources about what to say, what not to say when you have family members who are experiencing difficulties. And the most successful thing that you could do, this has worked very well, is if you feel that they really need help, it's important you actually take them for help. Don't tell them get help, they will not, because anybody with anxiety or depression have very low motivation, right? So it's important, they will not feel interested only in doing what, they will not be able to make judgments, take decisions, anything. So it's important that you tell them, okay, you know what, earlier this is how you used to be, now you no longer are doing all of these things which are interest, which you used to do. You used to spend a lot of time with friends, now I see most of the time you're at home. I can see you also looking teary-eyed in the morning. There is something that you're going through. I'm there if you want me to, if you want to talk, I'm there to listen to you. You can tell me anything, no judgments. And if you want me to come with you to a person, I would come with you as well. And that process of being there for them, that is not advice. You're not telling them. I know a lot of people who tell, go get help, and they will send one number across saying, call them. That will not work, right? They're not going to feel motivated enough. So please go along with them. That's the best thing you could do, or connect to a friend or a family member who can be involved in this and take them if you're not available. How do I explain the importance of mental health to my family? They don't seem to think it's important, right? So mental health doesn't necessarily have to be addressed as mental health to the family. You don't have to bring up, like, a chart board and, make a presentation to your family about something which is a big topic like mental health, but in every small ways which is possible, right? For example, I have a friend who, where the parents and him discuss mainly the problems that are going on in their family. So that's the relationship that they have. Most of their conversations would be the difficulties that they're facing. So instead, what you can start doing from your end is start talking about positive things too. So from your side, you can start initiating some change and create a little more sensitivity, therefore, saying that we keep talking about all the difficulties in a family, but we fail to appreciate the good things that are going on in the same family. So you start doing it, and then you could make them more sensitive, therefore, to how they need to be, how they need to communicate. We always feel the problem is there on the other side. We're very good at pointing fingers and saying it's their fault, but definitely this is something which you can also take a part in, which you have control over. Start sensitizing them. And if in case you have a mental health concern, and if your family is very rigid. Like this particular client that I have, she's going through a lot of not only depression, but because of depression and because of not being able to talk to her family members, she started recently to start hearing voices. Right? She starts hearing voices, she starts seeing a person who's following her around in her house. So it's basically developed into hallucinations, which is a more severe level of depression. Now, her family only tells her to pray. Yeah, her family only tells her to pray and nothing else. And they always feel that because of the way she's acting, that she's possessed. They say that this is the devil acting on you. Something has come over you. You must be thinking evil thoughts. That's why it's like this. You start thinking positively, and you pray more. Everything will be okay. But that doesn't, so this person is not really getting heard. So at that point, the focus is not on educating them about mental health, but about getting health itself. Right. So it's important then that we connect to any family member. So when it comes to Indian families, that's one of the benefits, right? It's not just dad and mom. We have multiple uncles, aunts, seniors. So here we actually worked through her college counselor, even though the colleges are closed. So we use the college counselor to sensitize her elder cousin sister about this particular issue so that together they could approach the family about the need of the hour. So if you look at it, there's definitely a way. You may not be able to see the solution. That's what happens in a lot of times with depression, with suicide, that when you are feeling extremely distressed, you will not be able to see a solution. But that does not mean that there is no solution, right? That's why we have trained professionals, we have counselors, we have mental health professionals who will be able to show you a different perspective to it. Because if you're in between a problem, you will not be able to understand it better. But if the problem is on a page, like it's an engineering sum on a textbook, you will be able to approach it from an objective point of view rather than personally associating with it. So there's definitely a way to also be able to sensitize your family. You should never um, yeah, so I always fear about losing my loved ones every day. Um, right. So I think that could be related to death anxiety, which is quite common. Normally, also we have. But what we need to understand is there is no use focusing on things that you can't control, right? If a person is present with us or is no more, we can't control that. Whether the virus affects a person or it doesn't, we can't control that. But what you can control is, for example, if you are worried constantly that you would get infected by the virus, you can't control whether or not you do. But from your end, what can you control? You can control whether you choose to go out or not, or whether you take the precautions or not, or whether you build up your immunity or not, the kind of foods that you have. There's so many things that are under your control. So you do what you can and what's under your control instead of constantly focusing on things that are not. Okay, so just that shift of focus will actually help. Right. So fear of speaking to people because you're afraid that you will be judged is going to be there not only here, whichever domain you walk into, work, college, school, friendships, there's always a fear of judgment. But that does not mean that you stop talking about it, right? The best mental health concerns have been addressed because people did not stop talking, even if people told them to stop or that they're not going to be heard. It just means you have to find another person who's being willing to listen to you. That's one of the advantages we have right now because awareness about mental health is coming up. We have plenty of forums where you have therapists who help you. It can even, there are people who, because of financial difficulties right now in the lockdown period, there are many therapists who are offering services for either half their charge or some organizations which even offer it for free. There is a lot of resources, blogs, platforms where you could chat with therapists. So there is definitely a place out there for you to voice out and you're going to be heard. It's just about whether you're going to try. Okay. I'm not sure if I've covered all the questions. How do we help ourselves to come out of this condition at an early age? Okay, so now we are looking at preventive measures, right? What can keep you from, what can reduce your vulnerability to developing anxiety or depression, even if the stressors are going up? One of the things that you could do is, so I will look at it in keeping the mind active and keeping the body active. Self, so the mind active, self love is something which is very rare in our culture, right? We are always, we feel that if we focus too much on ourselves, it becomes selfish. That's not true. We need to be kind to ourselves. Just because we don't get a job offer doesn't mean that we are bad or we are worthless or we are a bad student or we are a failure to our parents. They might say that. It's also about what you think about yourself. So self perception matters a lot. So be kind to yourselves. Don't be very harsh if there is a failure. You should not equate, let's say, just because you feel bad doesn't mean that you are bad. Just because you feel like a failure doesn't mean that you are a failure. We always equate feeling something to that is what we are. And this is one of the things I always tell parents when I work with their children, that even if they do something wrong, we are so used to telling you're a bad boy, you are a bad boy, right? And that's how we bring up kids. You're a bad boy or a good boy. So they, if you tell a bad boy, if you tell a person you're a bad boy 10 times, then they will just go ahead and do it because they feel bad anyway. And that's how it operates way into adulthood. Okay, we need to understand the difference between a bad decision and a, there is nothing called as a bad person, right? It's a person who might make a bad decision, that's all. So don't personalize everything. And when I say stay positive, it's not easy, it requires effort. But if you make it a habit, right? For example, if I tell you to change the direction in which you are brushing your teeth, you will not be able to do it in just one night because you've been brushing 20 years of your life in a particular way. But if you practice the new method for a couple more days, a couple more weeks, it might change. This is like driving in India, and then when you move abroad, people learn how to drive in a different culture because they practice there. It's the same thing. So you need to practice positivity in your life, practice gratitude in your life, and learn to appreciate another. We don't appreciate some things like, I've realized, for example, the mothers, right? We just take their role for granted, that they're supposed to do certain things and that's their duty. It is not so, right? Just as it's not your duty to get a job, it's not your duty to have a successful relationship, but anything that is done, it's important that you appreciate the person for it, right? So things like gratitude, being grateful for what you do have. For those of you who are afraid of, say, job prospects, be grateful that you have a degree. Be grateful that you have skills, right? That you have a computer to type up a resume, that you have internet, that this economy is not something that is forever going to be down, right? India has survived the worst economic the downside of all times, and we will get through it. It's all just a phase. So because of a phase, we don't have to make our whole lives about this one small phase that we're going through, right? And it's okay to not be productive. You need to understand to also, we need to be comfortable lazing also, right? I don't know how many of you can actually lie down in your bed for 1 hour without sleeping and without holding your mobile. There's nothing. Automatically, you will start to feel restless. Your thoughts will start. You will be thinking about what to do, what to cook, what to study, who to call. That's how we are. Okay, so those are a couple of things that you can do. Exercise, very important. um, we need to be physically active, especially during the lockdown time. Our physical movement outside is restricted. So what are all of you doing with all that energy that you have, right? Are you just keeping it locked in the fridge, freezing it and using it later for use? No, the energy is still in your body. What are you doing with it? If you're sitting in front of Netflix or your mobile or in front of the TV for 8 hours, that energy is going nowhere. That's where the thoughts start, because energy inside your body, whether it's positive or negative, it's just energy. So if you're not using it in a positive manner, when you have negative thoughts, those energy will come out and make those thoughts even more negative. So it's very important that you exercise, have positive physical activity. Uh, I always tell, in a case of a family, it's important that you have productive time as a family together, where you do your daily activities, your chores, your household routines, that is productive time together. You need all of you to have productive time independently. That can be your job, course, work related, your business related, that is productive time independently. And you need to have happy, enjoyable time together, right? That is good times that you could spend with your family together, not when you come together and discuss budget, but come together to have a family night, to watch a movie together, cook a meal together. These are some things that you could do. Um Overthinking can also lead to anxiety, right? So overthinking, it's not something that you can just stop doing over a process, over a period, over a night. It's important to ask yourself, what is the where are those thoughts stemming from, and what is the output of thinking so much? Is it making you feel better, or is it making you feel worse? And most of the times, a tendency to overthink, this overthinking comes in the night time, evening, before you go to bed. So I would say that, for example, if you're thinking a lot in the night after you get to bed, then that means don't lie down in bed until you're sleepy. Don't lie down and think. If you're thinking a lot, go sit on the floor. If you're thinking a lot, go for a walk. If you're thinking a lot, listen to some music. Don't lie down in bed, use your mobile, think a lot, and then sleep at 4 in the morning, right? Then the bed becomes associated with excessive of thinking, right? So that's one of the things that you could actually do to control your anxiety. And then relaxation exercises can also help, because overthinking is something which is a rapid activity of the brain. When you calm down, you're not likely to think. So if you're somebody who has a tendency to think a lot, then meditation, yoga, breathing exercises, all of that can actually help. um, right. I hope I've not missed any questions. um, can we overcome these emotions completely if we observe, record? Yeah. So if we are more aware about our emotions, aware of our thoughts, that alone doesn't help. You also need to initiate positive activity from your end, which means, let's say, so earlier when I was going through a low phase, the first thing which will come to my mind is, I don't feel like getting out of bed. Why do I have to put the effort to go out? Tomorrow I'll do it. It'll be fine. But then that's where we make a mistake, because we push away recovery. It's important to fight that difficult time at that moment and get up and go. If you're constantly feeling difficult for a long period of time, writing about it, talking about it, and when I say talking about it, see, even here there is about 40 of you on the talk, right? So if you have friends here itself, you all understand the importance of non-judgmental listening. So if you have friends here and you're going through a difficult time, talk to a person who you trust. Talk to a person who will not judge. Sometimes just talking, that cathartic process where your energy comes out, is very relieving in itself. And if you can, and start engaging yourself in in physical activities, right? Exercise, eat healthy, maintain your routines. Don't sleep at 4, get up at 12, then your biological cycle only is completely screwed up. And both depression and anxiety has a very strong chemical, like one of the influences is chemical changes in the brain. That is why when we take medication, that chemical imbalance restores, right? But even without that, it's important that our routines are functioning normally. If we sleep late, we are reacting poorly to stress. How do we stay up late? Using the mobile phone. But nobody will read about articles which show that the light of the mobile phone is keeping your brain active and alert in the night. So we keep reading the mobile phone saying, I'm not getting to sleep. Sleep is not happening. Sleep is not happening. But you're doing the very thing that delays sleep. So it's important to be sensitive to these kind of things so you can maintain a healthy and a positive lifestyle. Love yourself more, show gratitude, appreciation, and exercise more. Connect to people who make you feel good about yourself. Family, There are even if two members make you feel bad, there might be this one member who makes you feel good. Reconnect with old friends who bring in good memories with them. Don't make your whole life about your issue. And if you feel that it's getting overwhelming for you, there are definitely resources where you could reach out. Okay. Okay. So, how do you deal with expectations? I would just say don't have many. Okay. Expectations, as long as I think one of my courses related to depression, the trainer actually tells us that you will only be disappointed when there are expectations. If there are no expectations, there are no disappointments. So if you have them, also have it realistically, right? I know people who tell me that if I don't get a job, then I don't know what I'll do with myself. That's a strong condition. You don't even have a backup. But then if you change that to, okay, I want to get a job. If the job doesn't work out, then this is something else that I could do. If that doesn't work out, this is a third thing that I could do. So flexibility in thinking, even though you have expectations, is the best coping that you could have. Don't have rigid thinking that this is the only way out. This is only how I will be. We go in relationships, especially. I have couples where one person will tell me, this is, this is how I am. I will not change. She has to change. So if there is rigidity, there's never going to be a compromise. So flexibility in thinking is the best thing that you could do as a way forward. Um, so there are a few other questions that I skipped out. Like I mentioned, I have collected resources already. So I think my page link was put up on the chat. It's called Reach Out to Rachel. We constantly have sessions there where we sensitize people about mental health issues. This weekend, we are having a talk on how do you identify signs of suicide and how do you intervene. So you don't have to be a mental health professional to do this. It can be anybody, but there are a lot of things that you could equip yourself with. In fact, I think I would like to conclude with how the introduction actually started for this talk, right? It's important we empathize and prioritize mental health concerns, and anybody could do that. Anybody, you, me, next door, that same auntie who you were compared to, know that auntie's son, she also can do it. Anybody can do it. We just need to empathize and prioritize mental health concerns. So if you have any other questions, you can definitely inbox me on that and I would get back to you immediately. The page is very interactive. We're constantly putting out material that can help you, and you could also forward it to other people who it will benefit from. So I hope this was useful for you. And thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much. I know I'm winding up exactly at exactly at 5, the time that was given. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really a great section. We all loved it. I don't know about others, but really, I was so inspired and motivated by your words. Like it was very much interactive. Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you all. And I just request my fellow member Prerna Kulkarni to just stand up for vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Rubini. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of the entire RCBMSY team, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the Honorable Speaker Rachel Jayasidan ma'am, who blessed us with their presence and took out valuable time from your busy schedule. Thank you, ma'am. I must mention a deep sense of appreciation for her inspirational speech and motivating us how to cope up with mental stress and other fears. I would also extend a special thanks to all the Rotarians who made time from their busy schedule and attended the event for us. Lastly, I thank each and every participant for their active participation, as no program can be successful with a single person. So I extend my thanks to the RCBMSY Lime Green Project volunteers for their support. Thank you guys for making this event a successful one.